Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where we work to untangle the messy knots of the health and fitness industry as if your children's lives depended on it. Because they do. This is where we decide to make our bodies stand for something bigger than ourselves. This is where we find practical wisdom to live by, one powerful conversation at a time. May the words spoken here inspire you to keep moving forward no matter where you are. Who knows who you could be if you could become 1% better every single day.
We can do the show thanks to the support of listeners just like you. For more information how you can become part of the inner circle, go to findingdadbod.com/inner circle.
What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. Today's show continues our TRUFIT series, and we have been going through macronutrients. We covered fats, we covered carbohydrates, and now we're covering my personal favorite, proteins. My goal in the TRUFIT series has been to help our listeners understand a long-term view of health and fitness, and it's been quite the process. In the health and fitness industry, many people's goals are boiled down to like a 30-day challenge or some 6-week plan to your New Year's resolution. And my goal in health and fitness is, and always has been, to help those I work with achieve better in their lives. And I'll argue anybody in saying that long-term better is much better than short-term better. And while that sounds like a good basis for a Dr. Seuss book, that's been the spirit for many episodes since January 2020. And though there's been a big interruption in the series with coronavirus, and we've had several experts come on to talk about things that are related, I'm happy to say that we're tying things up with the TRUFIT series. After this episode, I'll do an overview of macronutrients and energy balance, and then I have a special show for you to tie up the series and to challenge you in bringing about better long-term health and fitness for yourself. It's going to be awesome. 2 notes before we get into protein. 1, if you're a regular listener and you haven't already, it would mean a lot to me if you could take 1 to 2 minutes to go review the show positively on iTunes. Right now we have 41 5-star reviews for Defining Dad Bod. And every time we get another one, it puts us closer to the top of the podcast charts. That means it makes it easier for listeners to discover the work we're doing here. And I'm not going to lie, your positive reviews help me sleep better at night and encourage me to keep putting out great content. Our most recent 5-star review says, "So much value. A+. Alex is great, transparent, and always honest with the information provided. With so many opinions in health and fitness, this podcast needs to be at the top." Well, thank you very much, WBA53. I'll keep it coming. Again, if you haven't already, take a second to go review the podcast positively on your podcast platform, not because I'm trying to receive an A+ from the podcast charts, but because I want to make it as easy as possible for people to find good answers when they start searching for them. And there's a lot of bullcrap in the health and fitness world that we work hard to cut through here. So the more the merrier. And the second item on my list, join the Defining Dad Bod Inner Circle to get involved with our next Faithful 40 Challenge. Our last Faithful 40 Challenge was amazing, and I've taken the time to put my thoughts together in a live broadcast in the Inner Circle. We're going to launch another one very soon, and the 37 participants in the last challenge agree that it was a valuable and meaningful experience. For 40 days in the Inner Circle, I tagged participants in a post that asked them to journal their mindset, their exercise plan for the day, and their nutrition journal from yesterday, to be posted publicly for the group. And in doing so, that nudge created a lot of positive and powerful momentum for people, with accountability, support, and tips, tricks, and life hacks to bolster each other in a time when it's difficult to control your controllables. I'm not going to recreate my live broadcast here. I've already done that, and you can check out my sincere thoughts in the Inner Circle. Long story short, though, it was great. We're going to do it again. I'd love for you to be a part of it if it would be meaningful to you. So join us at definingdadbod.com/inner circle. It's free to you to be a part of the group, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the Faithful 40. Thanks so much for listening. Without further ado, let's get to the macronutrient called protein. It's going to be awesome. So we've made it through carbs, we've made it through fat. Let's talk about the last macronutrient, protein. Now, protein is a favorite training macronutrient for a number of reasons, and it forms the cornerstone of our macronutrient recommendations, which we'll talk about in the next episode of the TRUFIT series. But unlike carbs and fats, protein is not considered a primary energy source of the body. And so as we talk through the role of protein in the body, understand that we've shifted gears. And if we were to liken your body to a car, for instance, we've shifted from talking about fueling the engine to actually building the engine. And so things get pretty interesting here. So first, some simple facts you should know about proteins. When we talk about grams of protein in your diet, just like when we talk about grams of fats or grams of carbohydrates, we're actually simplifying a category that's much more complicated. Remember when we talked about carbohydrates and spoke specifically about grams of sugar versus grams of fiber? We talked about the relative impact on the microbiome or the changes that it might make to our blood sugar. And that sort of information is deeper than just how many grams of carbs I've eaten. Similarly with fats, we talked about things like the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, which adds a little more color to the composition of your grams of fats than just the total number of grams of fats. Now with protein, when you eat something that has protein in it, you can see that it has 10 grams of protein or 12 grams of protein. But what does that really tell us? Well, proteins are the building blocks for the complex structure of living things. The enzymes that allow metabolic reactions to happen in your body, or plants and animals, are all built out of proteins. The connective tissue, like your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles, even your bones, are constructed by long chains of complex proteins linked together. And then maybe most importantly, the DNA and RNA, deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid, that make up the genetic material, the blueprints for telling your body what to do, are all built out of proteins. And so today I want to talk to you about the structure of a protein, the amino acids that make them up, and then talk about why protein is an important part of your long-term health and fitness journey, so that in our next episode, when we talk about calculating your macronutrient needs and modifying those needs based on your training program, you'll have a much better idea of where those numbers come from. So, proteins are the building blocks for the complex mechanisms and structures that allow life to go on. And that's true of both plants and animals. But what is a protein made of? Well, primarily, proteins are different from fats and carbohydrates because we've added one primary element to the structure of the molecules, and that is nitrogen. If you'll remember, fats are made up of primarily carbons and hydrogens, and there is an amazing amount of energy stored in a hydrocarbon, and so our body uses fats as a storage conduit for energy, as well as building the lipid bilayer around cells. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, add oxygen to that mix, and so they are a fantastic source of short-term energy because oxygen's built right into the molecule. The body isn't required to move oxygen to the cells in order to get at the energy that's trapped in a carbohydrate. So we have carbon, we have oxygen, we have hydrogen, and then amino acids add nitrogen, and some even add sulfur to the mix for extra credit. And the presence of nitrogen adds some rigidity to the molecules themselves. And so the body can actually use amino acids to chain together long, stable strands of molecules that can be used as building blocks. Imagine that you and your kiddo wanted to sit down to build an amazing Lego tower. And you open the box, and there are several different types of blocks in there. Some of them are long rectangles with 12 places to put different blocks on top of it. Some are smaller rectangles, and then you have a few that are those little squares. I don't know how things work in your house, but in our house, there's always a fight over who gets the big long ones, because we know we can build much cooler towers with the big long ones versus the small ones. But I digress. Imagine those are amino acids, nice and rigid, with several places where you can connect different things to them, and because they hold their shape and their form, you can build great structures, almost an infinite number of structures out of them. The variety and rigidity is important because there are so many structures within your body that are required to build out of those essential building blocks. So your body depends on the rigidity of the amino acids to build itself out of them. And this metaphor turns out really well, because you are basically built out of the Lego building blocks of amino acids. And there are exactly 21 amino acids that you're built out of. And when you look at a food label, and it tells you you have X grams of protein in this specific food, what it doesn't tell you is what collection of amino acids comprise that food. And this can be problematic for you because you need all 21 of those Lego blocks in order to create important structures in your body. Things get even more interesting when you consider that out of the 21 blocks that you need, the amino acids, there are 6 that you can build from scratch. There are another 6 that you can build a little bit of, but probably need to eat regularly. And then there are 9 that your body cannot build, and you are required to consume those in your diet, or you will be deficient and unable to build the structures you need to. And so this is where protein sources get really interesting. For our purposes here, I'm not going to focus on the 6 amino acids that you can build yourself. It's happening without your help, and unless you're very malnourished, it's unlikely that you're deficient in any of those amino acids. But for many of my clients, the emphasis on protein intake when we look at food journals on a regular basis emphasize getting enough of these essential amino acids into our diet. Those 9 essential amino acids are phenylalanine, valine, threonine, tryptophan, methionine, leucine, isoleucine, lysine, and histidine. I hope you wrote those down. There will be a quiz right after this. Now I can almost hear you saying, wow, Alex, that's a lot to keep track of. Can't I just go back to counting my protein grams? That's a great question. And the answer is yes. You will get these essential amino acids if you are consuming enough what we call complete proteins. Now, if you're not squeamish about consuming animal products, then getting complete proteins is actually not that difficult. If your protein sources include dairy, eggs, fish, beef, chicken, pork, and even bivalves like oysters, mussels, and clams, then you're not going to have a very hard time getting enough of these essential amino acids in your diet. It makes sense, right? If you need these amino acids, then other living things also need these amino acids. And animal products are almost always a complete protein source with regard to these essential amino acids. Where things get interesting and difficult is when there's a restriction on dietary habits with regard to animal products. Let's say you're allergic to eggs, for instance. Eggs are one of my favorite sources of complete proteins to recommend to my clients. But if you take those out of the equation, then the question becomes, what are some other good sources of complete proteins? Similarly, I have clients who hate the taste of fish, which is frustrating for me as a professional who's trying to get omega-3 fatty acids into people while maintaining a decent source of lean proteins. So if I have a client who's unable to eat eggs because they're allergic and who's unwilling to eat fish because they don't like the taste, then we've eliminated 2 fantastic sources of complete proteins and are going to have to find some alternatives. The basic point I'm hoping to make for you here, though, is that getting enough protein in your day is extremely important, especially because there are essential amino acids that your body works really hard to build itself out of and that you can't make yourself. Imagine if you started exercising really hard. You're pushing the envelope on your deadlift. You're doing a few more intervals than usual. You increase the incline on your treadmill, and you really tax the cells in your body hard, and you say, hey, you're not strong enough yet. And you unlock a part of your genetic material that says, all right, we got to get stronger. We've got to increase our mitochondria around here. We've got to increase the density of our ligaments and tendons. We've got to output more ATP. Turn on the factories. And so your cells get to work trying to code for new proteins to build new structures and to unlock a better part of you. The problem is, the stress of the cellular adaptation is only part of it, you exercising hard. But if you don't provide your body with the essential amino acids required to build those structures, then what you've done is you've stressed the system out without giving it the materials required to build a better version of you. And I see this happen very frequently as a professional. Many clients will start exercising regularly. They'll feel hungrier because their body's asking for additional nutrients. But when you're hungrier, you don't generally picture high-protein foods to add to your regimen. And so clients tend to consume more calories when they exercise, but not necessarily increase their protein intake because of their exercise. And so they're giving their body more fuel for exercise, but they're not giving their body more building blocks to improve the condition of the tissues and cells because of the exercise adaptations. The net effect? They feel a little more energetic, they see some results, but they plateau quickly and their workout progress stops in its tracks. Many times, they end up injured, frustrated, and demotivated because of the lack of results and the overall breakdown their body feels because of the added stress without the added building blocks. As a trainer, this hurts me inside because it's a relatively easy fix. Track your protein for a couple weeks. Work to increase your protein intake with complete protein sources, and boom, you're back in business. Your body has the building blocks it needs, those essential amino acids, to build better tissues. You see a metabolic uptick because of those metabolically active tissues, and your hunger is satiated because you're actually feeding your body what it needs to improve itself, and so your adaptations can continue. You get faster, you get stronger, you get leaner, and everybody's happy, right? And then from a caloric perspective, which we'll talk about more next week when we talk about how to build your own macronutrient profile, you get a slight benefit because protein, that is, the amino acids you're consuming, require a lot more energy to process digestively than fats or carbohydrates. This effect is called the thermic effect of food. And also imagine somebody's gone through the trouble of making sure that there are 200 calories of each food sitting in front of you. 200 calories of butter on the left, 200 calories of oatmeal in the middle, and 200 calories of salmon, and 200 calories of sardines on the right. The question is, how many of those calories from each of those foods are actually available to your body after digestion? The answer is, calories from fat tend to transfer very quickly, easily, and efficiently. Almost every calorie from butter ends up being able to be used as energy. It doesn't take much energy to process it. Similarly, almost every calorie from the bowl of oatmeal in front of you is going to be used as energy in your body. Just like butter, it doesn't take much energy to digest carbohydrates, and they transfer very efficiently to the bloodstream. But that's not the story with sardines. The energy required from your body to break down the proteins into its constituent amino acids, and then transfer those to the bloodstream, and then shuttle them to the cells to be used to build other things, is actually a very energy inefficient process. And so, diets higher in protein compared to carbohydrates and fats tend to require a lot more energy or calories from the body's metabolism in order to process well. This means for many people who I've worked with in the past, if they made no other changes to their diet at all, except to increase their protein intake in relation to their carbohydrates and fats, then they would see better body composition results, they'd see weight loss, and because protein is so satiating, oftentimes they'd see an overall decrease in total caloric consumption. This means that an argument can easily be made that if you've plateaued on your long-term health and fitness journey, especially in relationship to athletic performance or body composition goals, then when you're hungry, reach for a protein source first. Because pound for pound, protein is going to be your biggest bang for your buck to fuel cellular adaptations, to build your body well, and not to contribute excessive amounts of calories to your life. Now, so far, I've said a lot of things. A quick recap. Proteins are the building blocks of all of the complex living compounds required for plants and animals. Enzymes, connective tissue, DNA and RNA, all of those things are built by chaining amino acids together to make new proteins in your body. There are 21 amino acids. You could think of those as the building blocks that create proteins, and 9 of those cannot be created by your body and therefore must be consumed in your nutrient profile. And interestingly enough, many people have stumbled upon better body composition by simply improving their protein intake, because protein digestion and utilization is much less efficient than fat and carbohydrate digestion and utilization. That is, protein's much less likely to be stored as fat on your body than the other two macronutrients. Unless there are restrictions on your diet, getting complete protein sources is relatively easy today. Eggs and fish are my favorite recommendations to make to clients for the most part, specifically those high omega-3 fish, like salmon, mackerel, and sardines. But protein comes just as easily and just as completely from other animal products as well. Beef, chicken, turkey, pork, other wild game, and heck, even crickets are all complete protein sources. But if you do have restrictions on your diet, it's important to make sure that the 9 essential amino acids are still a part of your diet. And if you have special considerations around your diet, either because of a food sensitivity, a disease, or a lifestyle conviction, we'd love to help you balance that out. You can reach out at coachal@definingdadbod.com. And that also goes for you who might be wrestling with kidney disease, liver disease, or gout. The rest of what I'm about to say here on the show does not apply to you if you have restrictions on your protein intake. So now you have a rough idea of what protein does in the body, and some important considerations about complete proteins. So how much should you eat? It turns out that protein is my favorite macronutrient because in conjunction with your training program, it's a fantastic linchpin to inform how many carbs and fats you should also be eating. To make a very complex answer simple, if you're exercising regularly and you don't have any medical obstacles, then you should be consuming 1 gram of protein for every pound of lean body mass on you. Now, the research on this subject varies. The essential recommendation from the American Dietetic Association is 0.5 grams of protein per pound per person. So if I'm a 160-pound man, that means I should be consuming about 80 grams of protein at the very minimum, according to the ADA. Some recommendations go even lower than that. But when you look at the sports literature, the protein needs of a person go up as they engage in different sorts of activities. The higher intensity of the activity, the higher the protein recommendation goes. If you're involved in cardiovascular exercise, for instance, like cycling, running, or swimming, then protein recommendations come up to about 0.8 grams of protein per pound of mass. So as a 160-pound man, that brings my protein recommendation to 128 grams per day, Why does your protein need go up when you exercise? Partially because you have more lean body mass to support your activity. And remember, the lean body mass is constructed from protein. But the other thing that's important to note is that protein is required to recover from cellular damage. Exercise is the good stress after all. And when you engage in exercise regularly, you are damaging your cells and then asking them to rebuild themselves stronger next time. Now that's a gross oversimplification of biological adaptation, but I think you get the picture. The harder and more intense your exercise, the more protein you need. And so that brings me to the higher protein recommendations. If you're engaging in weight training very regularly, that is 3 to 5 days per week, especially if it's heavy, high intensity, or high volume, then your protein recommendations go pretty high. In fact, for things like sprinting, powerlifting, or CrossFit, sports recommendations for protein get all the way up to about 2 grams per pound of body weight. So for a 160-pound man, that's 320 grams of protein. Quite the range, isn't it? If I'm not exercising, 80 grams of protein according to the American Dietetic Association, and if I'm kicking my butt regularly, 320 grams, or at least up to that, according to some of the sports research. So how do you know how much you should be eating? And here's where the rubber meets the road. In my practice as a personal trainer, the average person I work with is not interested in working out 10 to 15 hours per week. At most, they're probably about 5 to 8 hours per week. And there's a steady mix of cardiovascular exercise and resistance training. Additionally, most people that I work with are trying to gain or maintain muscle tissue while burning, or at least not gaining, fat mass. And so a fantastic, middle-of-the-road starting recommendation for protein intake is 1 gram of protein for every pound of lean body mass. The calculation's just a little more complicated, but if you'll hang with me for just a second, I think it'll make sense to you. Note, thus far, we've been talking about certain grams of protein per pound of mass. That's mass total. But pounds of lean body mass take into account how many pounds of a person is probably fat pounds. So I've been using a 160-pound man for my recommendations thus far. We'll keep doing that. Let's say we have a 160-pound man who's 10% body fat. That means 16 of his 160 pounds are body fat. So how much lean mass is on this guy? So 160 minus 16 is 144 pounds of lean mass. And so a great starting recommendation for how many grams of protein this man needs in a day, if he's exercising regularly, not too intensely, but also not sedentary, is to get at least 144 grams of protein per day. And in my practice, if I don't know anything else about the person, that's our starting point. After a couple weeks, if our digestive system's happy with us, if we're growing some muscle tissue, if we're losing fat tissue, and all things elsewise are maintainable, then we keep that recommendation until we need to change it. But what I like about the recommendation is that it grows with your muscle mass, which is what you would expect your protein needs to do as you grow muscle mass. That's especially important if you're 300 pounds and you're trying to lose 100 pounds. Your protein needs should actually increase as you gain mass, even though increasing your muscle mass will probably decrease your fat mass. I've worked with people who started with their protein intake at 100 grams, but because they lost so much weight, they were dropping their protein intake, which was not good for their metabolic tissue. Don't be that guy. Now, I've said a lot of things. Let's recap and make sure your head's not spinning. Protein is, in my opinion, the most important macronutrient because 1, it's the building blocks for all of the essential compounds that make up life in your body. 2, from an energetic perspective, protein is the least likely macronutrient you can consume that will turn into fat on your body. And 3, because of these things, and the protein requirement of metabolic tissues in your body to recover, protein is the linchpin for any macronutrient recommendation that somebody can give you. And unless there's a medical obstacle that you're wrestling with, like kidney disease, liver disease, or gout, then more high-quality protein in your diet is usually better. Now personally, I'm really looking forward to the next episode of the TRUFIT series, where I help you understand how protein, carbohydrates, and fats can be used in the big picture to help you get better adaptations from your workout program and to pursue your health and fitness for the long haul. Until then, though, I hope you understand carbs, fats, and proteins better. They're not just a number in grams. There's a lot more to it than that. And I hope by understanding these things, you can improve both the quality of your food and make the best use of your quantity. This has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Until next time, guys, kick butt, take names.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The free, practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased thanks to the support of listeners just like you. If this episode's been helpful to you, please share it with somebody in your life who you know it will benefit. Then, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. And finally, if you want more Defining Dad Bod, consider joining our online community. We send a lot of free perks and resources your way, and I, Coach Alex, go live every month to talk through our listeners' health and fitness questions to make the practical science of this show applicable to everyday life. Everyone's welcome, and we'd love to have you. For more information about joining the Inner Circle or becoming a supporter of the Defining Dad Bod podcast, go to definingdadbod.com/inner circle. That's definingdadbod.com/inner circle.